Okay, so I got cut off on the last video, but people with borderline personality disorder are often going to deal with substance abuse issues. Again, a lot of this is related to wanting that attention in order for someone to avoid abandonment. So in order to be diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, you need to have at least 5 of the following features that are dysfunctional within someone's life. Okay, the next that is probably the most important for you to know is antisocial personality disorder. And before we get into this, I want to stop and talk about the word antisocial. This is not going to be referred to as like antisocial, like I don't want to talk to people, okay? Remember, that would be the schizoid personality disorder. Antisocial means not social behavior, things that are not appropriate for society. Okay, so the opposite of antisocial is prosocial, which is altruistic or helping behavior, doing good. And so antisocial would be the opposite of that. Okay, and if you understand that now, it's going to help you a lot for next unit when we get to social psychology. Okay, so antisocial personality disorder is probably the most well-known personality disorder out there. In order to be diagnosed with APD, you need to have at least 3 of the following. So they have to have lack of conforming to laws. Basically, they're breaking the law by repeatedly committing crimes. Repeated deceitfulness in relationships, meaning they're continually lying with others. Using false names is common, or conning others for profit or for pleasure. Failure to think or plan ahead, meaning they're very impulsive. Tendency to of irritability, anger, aggression. This is shown by repeatedly assaulting others or getting into frequent physical or verbal fights. And then a disregard for their own personal safety or the safety of others. So oftentimes we see this in recurrent criminals, serial killers, et cetera, et cetera. However, not every serial killer is going to have antisocial personality disorder, but and not everyone with antisocial personality disorder is going to be a serial killer, okay? Okay, this personality cannot be diagnosed until an individual is 18 years old. However, in order to be diagnosed with this, the person must have shown the symptoms that we talked about earlier since the age of 15. So they're going to have to show this disorder over time. We can't just say, oh, they started doing this, perfect, let's check it off the box. No, like we're going to have to see these symptoms over time. Usually the individual has been previously diagnosed with a childhood conduct disorder that we're going to talk about next unit or next video. This occurs way more often in males than it does in females. And then we sometimes see the terms sociopath and psychopath in relation to APD. So some of the causes of APD, some studies have suggested a genetic predisposition, could potentially be in the form of a chronic underarousal of both the autonomic and central nervous system, meaning that the nerves aren't aroused, meaning that there's no anxiety, right? Or lack of, or low anxiety, which makes people less sensitive to punishment. Other research has linked an underdeveloped amygdala, which would decrease that fear or anger response. And then others believe that the environmental factors like broken homes, rejection by parents, poor discipline, lack of good parental models, lack of attachment, impulsivity, conflict-filled childhoods, blah, blah, blah. All of those would play a role in someone developing antisocial personality disorder. In reality, it's probably a mixture of both, right? Nature and nurture are both playing a role. We have done some studies of murderers and trying to see how their brain is different. So PET scans of 41 murderers revealed a reduced activity in the frontal lobe. Remember, our frontal lobe controls that impulsivity. And so if we have reduced activity there, you're going to be more impulsive. A follow-up study showed repeat offenders had 11% less frontal lobe activity compared to normal brains. So that's 11% more impulsive than normal brains. Okay, so with these next conduct disorders that we're going to talk about, I'm going to talk about them because most people with APD have been diagnosed with these two conduct disorders, or one of these two conduct disorders first. But we're going to talk more about them next video when we talk about neurodevelopmental disorders. And the reason these cannot be personality disorders is because they occur in children. Okay? So conduct disorder is a repetitive and persistent pattern of behavior in which the basic rights of others or major age-appropriate norms are violated, meaning they are constantly breaking rules. They're constantly, maybe harming animals, harming their brothers or sisters. Usually these behaviors are referred to as antisocial behaviors. Okay, so they are going to be doing things that are really not age-appropriate. Maybe they're doing excessive sexual behavior, or they're mutilating genitals of dolls. Those are the kinds of things that we would see in conduct disorder. Oppositional defiant disorder is like a step down. Okay, so this disorder is going to be frequent and persistent pattern of anger, irritability, arguing defiance, or vindictiveness towards their parents or any other authority figures. This is dealing more with the mood of the child rather than the actual behaviors. Okay, and then finally, cluster C of the personality disorders. These are pretty self-explanatory, so that's why I don't spend a ton of time on them. But avoidant is going to be feelings of just like not wanting to be around other people, maybe feeling inadequate. They're very, very sensitive to negative criticism and rejection. And it causes significant inabilities to maintain relationships. They feel like people are constantly putting them down, and so they cannot be in relationships with people that function normally. The next is dependent personality disorder. This is characterized by an inability to be alone. Usually they're going to develop anxiety when they're not around other people. They need constant reassurance from others in order to function and be normal in their everyday life. And then finally, obsessive compulsive personality disorder. So we have talked about OCD when we talked about anxiety disorder. This is personality disorder. So OCPD is going to be characterized by a preoccupation of orderliness, perfectionism, and mental and interpersonal control. So they're unable to give up control, and that makes them completely inflexible. They are not open to change, to the point that it makes them inefficient. Okay, so this does not have those obsessive thoughts and then the compulsions. This has the preoccupation with the orderliness. So because people with OCD sometimes exhibit this like extreme perfectionism or orderliness, that's why this is referred to as OCPD, because the person is so wrapped up in needing to do this all of the time that they cannot get away from their normal life. However, they don't have this obsessive thought thinking that it's going to make something bad happen. Okay. So that wraps our discussion of personality and dissociative disorders. We are going to move on to next, neurodevelopmental disorders.